And I'll turn it over now to Sharon for NPC's opening remarks.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. It's very good to see so many people and so many people from my home community of Cambridge Bay and Kitikmeot. Always good to see our region over in this area. So this is the fourth technical session that the Commission is holding for the draft Nunavut Land Use Plan. As David said, the workshop agenda is full. We have weather with us, as always, and we're scheduled to finish Wednesday at 5 p.m. And right after that workshop, we will be starting the marine portion of the technical workshop, and we'll be doing evening sessions, and we'll be starting the marine workshop at 7 p.m. on Wednesday. So the Commission, first of all, we'd like to thank you for your submissions for this workshop. Caribou is by far the most emotional topic in Nunavut, and a great deal of input has been provided on the subject. We are here today to discuss your recommendations on caribou protection, and we ask for two very specific types of information, which you have already read in the agenda, but we are going to reiterate it. First, we need to identify with reasonable accuracy caribou habitat that is relied on during the different seasons. The caribou habitat included in Schedule A of the 2014 draft of the Nunavut Land Use Plan uses the boundaries of core calving and post-calving areas for the mainland caribou that were provided by the Government of Nunavut. If your organization wishes to add, change, or delete these areas, we need to know your reasons why, what the alternatives are, and to be clear and simple. This is the opportunity to describe your recommended changes in front of other participants in a transparent, consultative form. Your suggestions will be reviewed and hopefully consensus will be achieved at this meeting or leading up to the public hearing. Secondly, the MPC needs to know what policies should be included in the plan for what type of habitat, and if there is a need to have a different policy for the different herds. The Commission wants to make a few things abundantly clear for this workshop. This forum is a respectful one. It's one that the Commission is here to listen to all parties equally. We need to understand everyone's perspective and the reasons for those perspectives. Our staff, when they ask questions, they're genuinely trying to understand your position and the information from a high level. It's comprehensive, and we want to ensure a holistic approach. To help ensure we capture everything in this session, we are recording it. We have audio, and we have a full transcript, as David said earlier, and the transcripts will be available for you within the next 2 to 3 weeks. So when you speak, please say your name and your organization for the record. I know we say this every single meeting that we have, but I'm going to reiterate it again. This is a first-generation land use plan. It's not a forever plan. It's a plan that is a living document. The plan amendment can be proposed at any time, and the plan will be reviewed frequently, with a minimal every 5 years. We know herds move with time. The plan can adapt to changing caribou conditions, and in the future, as new information becomes available, it will be adapted into the plan. Planning can also provide an opportunity to coordinate research. We encourage participants also to think about what kind of universal research program is suitable for the Caribou in Nunavut, and to inform now and for the future for the Nunavut Land Use Plan. We look forward to hearing everyone over the course of the next couple days. And I look forward to speaking with many of you around the table individually. With that, David, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. The next item on the agenda is a review of draft plan approach to Caribou. Who's taking that one? Steve?
Peter Schultz, NPC. I'll cover points 2 and 3 of the agenda. It will only take a couple of minutes. Point 2 is reviewing what the 2014 draft, the current draft, what its approach to Caribou is. In essence, the Commission took the polygons that were advised by the government of Nunavut and all the advice was for mainland herds. There wasn't any for the island herds. For calving and post-calving areas, what the Commission did was it took those 2 sets of polygons and merged them, and then created from there 2 new types of polygons, calving and post-calving habitat, which is shown on the screen up there in green, and a separate type of habitat, or a separate type of polygon, which is calving and post-calving habitat with high mineral potential, which is shown as yellow on the screen there. So collectively, all the polygons you see there are all the calving and post-calving areas for the mainland herds as defined by the government of Nunavut. But the boundaries are not the boundaries between calving and post-calving. The boundaries you see are the boundary between where is high mineral potential, which was defined by INAC, and not high mineral potential. I'll quickly review what the proposed policies are for those 2 polygon sets you're seeing on the screen. For 47, which is the green, which is core calving habit.
Peter, you need to slow down a little bit. And by the way, folks, I do have control over everybody's mic, so which is kind of neat, actually. So I won't hesitate to use it if I need to. Okay, sorry, Peter.
Peter, NPC. So for the green, the core calving and post-calving habitat, it's proposed to be a protected area with the following prohibited uses: mineral exploration and production, oil and gas exploration and production, quarries, hydro development, all-weather roads, and any related research to any of the above. So quite a high level of protection. For the 48, which is the yellow, which is again also calving and post-calving areas, they are proposed to be a special management area with the terms as follows. The NPC may refer a project proposal falling within Schedule 12.1 to NERB for screening where NPC has concerns respecting the cumulative impact of that project proposal in relation to other development activities in that planning area. And the direction is that regulatory authorities need to mitigate impacts on calving and post-calving areas. So essentially the yellow is the same ecological system, but it's a strong flag to the regulatory authorities that these are important areas to caribou, and through the impact assessment process they need to be considered very carefully. That's for point 2. I'll just jump into point 3, and if there's any questions, we'll take them then. So comment on, oh yes, I'm sorry. In Schedule B, we also have the sea ice crossings for the dolphin and union herd running between Victoria Island and the mainland, which is again like a flag to regulatory authorities to take into consideration that that herd needs those crossings between the Victoria Island and the mainland. Moving to point 3 of the agenda, comment on Inuit-owned lands and high mineral potential. Those 2 topics have been moved to the back of this agenda to Wednesday, that we can have a comprehensive view of caribou habitat across the territory as a whole, and then we can move into any of these other factors as needed, but we'll all have that base understanding of caribou habitat that we'll build together over the next 2 days before we move into those kinds of discussions. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. I'm not going to entertain questions just now. We'll have plenty of time, I hope, for questions later. So we'll just roll into the opening remarks from each of the organizations. And the first will be the NWT and Nunavut Chamber of Mines. Mike, do you want to? And I again ask people to introduce themselves before they speak.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ublakut. Uvunga Mike Setterington. I'm a wildlife biologist and impact assessment specialist with a company called Environmental Dynamics in Whitehorse, Yukon. I've worked as a wildlife biologist for the environmental assessment of a number of mining and projects in Nunavut and in northern and western Canada. All of those projects have assessed and managed for potential impacts on caribou. EDI is a member of the Northwest Territories and Nunavut Chamber of Mines. And for this workshop, I am the technical representative of the Chamber and Nunavut's mining industry. The Northwest Territories and Nunavut Chamber of Mines performs the following functions in Nunavut. It monitors Nunavut developments and issues relevant to the mining industry. It provides information to industry, Nunavummiut and others, on exploration and mining in Nunavut. It provides community outreach about exploration and mining matters and opportunities. And of relevance to this workshop, it provides input to government on policy and legislation as it relates to exploration and mine development. The Chamber is at this 4th technical meeting to provide an exploration and mining business perspective on proposed protection measures for caribou in the draft Nunavut Land Use Plan. Based on discussions from the previous 3 technical meetings, there is a perception that there are organizations that are for and those that are against protection of caribou. This is not true. We are here because we are concerned about caribou and caribou management in Nunavut. The fact is that there are differences in opinions on approaches on how caribou can be protected. The Chamber is one of those organizations providing informed and manageable alternative approaches that will provide for the protection of Nunavut's caribou. Managing caribou is a responsibility of Nunavut's wildlife co-managers. The Chamber expects that policy and land use plan directions created by those organizations will be made on the basis of informed and sound management decisions that are derived from observed evidence, traditional knowledge, and reasonable estimates of impacts on caribou populations. The Chamber expects that reasonable approaches and alternatives will be considered, particularly where those management decisions may affect the progress and opportunities of the exploration and mining business. The Chamber is aware of the importance of caribou to the local economies and importance and well-being to Inuit and First Nation cultures. Protecting caribou and ensuring continued hunter access, sustainable harvest, and sustainable populations are as important to the Chamber as is protecting an environment of opportunity for discovery, developing profitable projects, and helping to sustain a part of Nunavut's economy. The Chamber shares the concerns for caribou supports land use planning, environmental management and assessment, and encourages the use of mitigation actions and protection measures where they make sense. We recognize that mining in Nunavut interacts with caribou, and there is no doubt that caribou can be disturbed by mining activities. Through the land use permit and environmental review process, industry continuously advances efforts to minimize disturbance to caribou. For active projects, this may mean reducing activities during important time for caribou, including calving and migration when caribou are present. Through Nunavut's Impact Review Board process, industry is leading many efforts in studying and monitoring the effects of exploration and mining disturbances on caribou. Industry is adapting to new information and new approaches to monitoring and reducing those effects.
Sorry, do you want me to advance the slides?
No, that's fine. There are 3 reasons why we should consider alternatives to many aspects of the protection measures proposed for the draft Nunavut Land Use Plan. Nunavut has years of experiences, and analyses repeatedly show that mining disturbances are not the drivers of caribou populations. Excluding industrial activity entirely from seasonal habitats will likely do little, if anything, for the recovery of caribou populations. The second reason is that Nunavut has a robust and effective environmental review and monitoring process. Individual projects are subject to intense scrutiny before they are permitted to operate. Additionally, existing protection tools for caribou, in use and improving since 1978, work. And the third reason is that the government of Nunavut's proposal for protected areas is not based on sound evidence and seemingly lacks overall strategy to address the root causes of caribou population limitation and regulation. These statements are supported by the Chamber's technical review of the caribou protection measures proposed for the draft Nunavut Land Use Plan. The review recommends alternative approaches and areas for potential improvements. The review also suggests reconsideration of the proposed protection measures. That technical review was posted on the Nunavut Planning Commission's website and is available for public viewing. The technical review provided an overview with references to key literature, shows that after more than 50 years of caribou research, there are still no established relationships between industrial disturbance and significant impacts to caribou population health in Nunavut. Regardless, the mining industry continues to study and assess potential impacts and continues to use best management practices and evolving strategies to reduce disturbance and impact monitoring. The government of Nunavut should consider alternative analyses for identifying core calving and key access corridor. The Chamber provided 8 recommendations for revisions, including analyses to better characterize variation in the areas and to better define what the important habitat features are in the core areas that require specific protection. In addition to the technical review and recommendations, environmental work for advanced exploration and mining projects continue to analyze and provide the results that characterize potential project and cumulative effects on Nunavut's caribou populations. Assessments have been completed and reviewed that include analysis of the Bathurst, Beverly, Ahayak.
Mike, are you going to wrap up fairly soon? We got a lot of stuff to go through. Yeah. Well, it was 10 minutes plus 5 minutes of questions, so there clearly won't be time for questions.
Okay. Those analyses for the caribou herds are detailed in, to date, 6 peer-reviewed assessments prepared for the public and review boards in the Northwest Territories and Nunavut. Managing impacts on caribou is a key exploration and project development concern. The industry has been working with caribou protection measures that have been applied across Nunavut for many years. On a case-by-case basis, individual caribou protection plans were developed through a regulated and collaborative process with input from government, Inuit associations, hunter and trapper associations, and communities. Sound management decisions have to be made on clear evidence, justification of what will work, and a commitment to follow-up effectiveness monitoring. Without a strategy and having those tools in place, it is premature to jump to habitat protection as the tool to protect caribou. Ladies and gentlemen, the Chamber suggests that we keep working with the existing tools and build what has already been working for the protection of caribou in Nunavut. We look forward to productive and focused discussions at this planning workshop. Kayunawik.
Thanks, Mike. As I said, there won't be time for questions, at this point at least. I want to remind people that we have a bunch of folks who want to speak, and I don't want to be delaying things because previous speaker or speakers have exceeded their time allotment. So please remember that there are other folks waiting to speak. And if you can just focus your presentation on 10 minutes on the key items, that would be, I think, appreciated by everybody. Miguel, are you speaking for NTI?
No, David, I think Hannah is. Thanks.
My name is Hannah Oniok-Sagak.
My name is Hannah Oniok-Sagak.
With me are my colleagues Paul Ingout, David Lee, Marie Ballot, and Miguel Chenier, as well as our colleagues from the Regional Inuit Associations. Thank you, NPC, for organizing this meeting and opening up the lines. Much appreciated. NTI recognizes the vital importance of healthy caribou populations now and in the future. NTI would like to see a Nunavut land use plan that addresses caribou protection adequately, and it also respects Inuit goals for the use of Inuit-owned lands. NTI sees this caribou technical meeting as an opportunity to gain better understanding of how caribou populations should be protected, monitored, and managed. We are looking forward to hearing from Inuit who are knowledgeable about caribou, as well as biologists and other technical experts. NTI is looking forward to working with all the organizations at this important meeting and building a consensus on how to address caribou in the first generation Nunavut land use plan. I'll keep my points brief.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Any questions? We have a couple minutes. All right. Kitikmeot Inuit Association, you're next.
Ublakut. Luigi Toretti, Kitikmeot Inuit Association. Thank you very much for having this fourth technical meeting. This is a difficult meeting, especially given the topic and the emotional attachment we all have to caribou here in Nunavut. The Kitikmeot Inuit Association is the regional association representing Inuit, and our mandate is to represent the interests of Kitikmeot Inuit by protecting and promoting our social, cultural, political, environmental, and economic well-being. As you can see, that spans quite a large spectrum, and we need to ensure that we can manage all of these. It is a very difficult chore. As such, we do promote the appropriate exploration and mining development in the interests of all Inuit. The projects must balance economic and social development, and they must sustain land, wildlife, and Inuit lifestyles. The KIA has been involved in the Nunavut Planning Commission process for a very long time. And in the last, about 2 years ago, there was a resolution, NTI resolution, for the regional Inuit associations and NTI to work together to try to put forward a common position on the land use plan. And I have to tip my hat to my colleagues because it is my feeling, my opinion, that we know the plan very well. We understand how it impacts Inuit, and we are trying to do our best to ensure that Inuit interests are represented in that plan. With respect to the process, the Nunavut Land Claims Agreement, Article 11.2.1b, special attention shall be devoted to protecting and promoting the existing and future well-being of Inuit and Inuit-owned lands. Article 11.2.1c, the planning process shall ensure land use plans reflect the priorities and values of the residents of the planning regions. 11.8.2, the land use planning process shall apply to Inuit-owned lands. Land use plans shall take into account Inuit goals and objectives for Inuit-owned lands. We understand these very well, and we are trying our best to ensure that Caribou, as well as economic development, are permitted as a result of the plan. The KIA has made a submission regarding Caribou at the first technical meeting. And I will, it's on the record, so I won't talk about it in detail, but I want to make it very clear, as has been stated by others, that Caribou are extremely important to the RIAs and NTI. And we do wish to find a solution, but the solution cannot be unilateral. It has to be respective of harvesters as well as people, Inuit, wanting to work with industry. There was a submission that was made to MPC by the Kuluktuk HTO, and I wish to bring that to the forefront. I asked about it. It is on the MPC records. The West is an area, the West Kitikmeot is an area that has experienced a lot of exploration, and there is a certain level of understanding of the impacts, and so there isn't a level of unilateral protectionism requested in the West. So we need to take that into consideration, especially when unemployment for Inuit in Nunavut is at 17%. It might be a little bit higher in the Kitikmeot, in fact. So in conclusion, it is a difficult balance, and we're trying to we're trying to walk that sword's edge. We've always tried to walk that sword's edge. We're not talking about complete and utter development, but we have to be understanding that there are harvesters, there are Inuit harvesters, and there are Inuit who want to participate in the wage economy. Time out.
Thanks, Luigi. Any questions? All right, a couple comments, I guess. One is that if we can ask people to slow down, it'll help Tommy. At the same time, I do want to get back to being on schedule. I think we're pretty close. We got a lot of stuff to do. The second thing, I guess, and this came up, well, it's come up in every workshop that we've had. There's no doubt that everyone's concerned about Caribou. The challenge, and it's been a frustrating exercise from my perspective as an independent chair of this. We talk a lot, but we haven't come to any clear consensus on what we need to do. And the test of our resolve, I think, to ensure that there are caribou sufficient for harvesting, but also to maintain the ecosystem, is going to be in what we do, not what we say. So I really encourage people to start thinking about what they're going to do and not repeating the messages that we've all heard before. No question about the sincerity, but there's a shortfall on action, and I think we can all agree on that. I think we're going to defer the Kivalliq Inuit Association presentation. Luis is not here. Hopefully we'll get in today or tomorrow, and we'll go there at that point. So I'll call on QIA. Okay, thanks.
Stephen Lonsdale with the Qigirtani Inuit Association. My director is traveling today, so I will be presenting on behalf of QIA. First of all, thank you for organizing the meetings, and welcome everyone to Iqaluit. My verbal presentation today will speak to a few items. One will be QIA's position on caribou protection. Number two, the ongoing development of the land use plan as it relates to community consultations. And lastly, questions and issues identified at the most recent community consultation in Sanikelor. Firstly, the caribou protection. This is already public knowledge and might have already been announced at the last technical meeting, but in October, at the QIA board meeting, NTI Wildlife and the GN Department of Environment gave a briefing on caribou protection measures. At that meeting, a resolution was passed by our board endorsing protection in caribou calving grounds and mobile protection measures in post-calving grounds. This is definitely a very complex issue that will be discussed over the next few days by everyone here. And following those discussions, it's safe to say that the land use plan will incorporate information and change once again. Which brings me to the next point of the ongoing development of this plan and how the community involvement was only at the initial phase during the 2013 consultations. Information was taken from community members and the plan was drafted and redrafted into the 2014 version that we see today. Something not yet presented back to the originating sources. Questions, concerns, and discussions around caribou over the next 3 days will see the plan change and evolve. QIA has stressed the importance of bringing this plan back to communities to ensure that the designations align with people's priorities and values, especially when it comes to Inuit-owned lands. From the time of the original consultations until a final hearing, you're looking at a minimum of, say, 3 different drafts. And the more that this plan changes without being presented in communities, the further away it will be from the people's priorities and values for the intended use of that land. QIA had the opportunity to return to one community, Sanikiluaq, for the continued consultations for land use planning. We had formally requested that the NPC accompany us, but the NPC was unable to attend. We felt that there was too many outstanding issues to be addressed, so we went on our own anyway. We presented to the clerk, the Community Lands and Resources Committee, the HTO, the Hamlet, and the public on facts and info on the land use plan, the consultation process to date, and the various proposed designations and associated prohibited activities. It was apparent that some of the designations were a surprise and that the community priorities and values were not fully reflected, especially for an IOL hunting area close to town designated as high mineral potential. Several of the different comments and questions included, why haven't we seen this map before? Referring to the land use plan designations map. The high mineral potential designation on IOL does not reflect what the community wants. Where did this data come from? How was the information gathered in 2013 used, and how is it assessed to get the designations? We still have many communities to follow up with to see if the land use plan designations align with community priorities and values for their intended use of their IOL. And we anticipate similar questions, concerns, and possible discrepancies from other communities regarding the land use plan, and we continue to stress the importance of community involvement in the ongoing consultations. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Just to forestall any comments about process, I'm going to remind people that there are discussions underway outside this room regarding process. So I'll just leave it there, because otherwise we can get into yet another bun fight.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity. You talked about...
Could you introduce yourself, please?
Thank you. Luigi Toretti, Kitikmeot Inuit Association. Your question at the end of my presentation was there's very little in terms of substance. The KIA has put forward a position. It is not a board directive, but it is a position that we did submit at the first hearing. So I welcome anybody to take a look at that. It should be on the NPC website. We are in favor of mobile protection measures. Just, we are not in favor of specific lines on a map, because those do not reflect the potential mobile and changes in calving areas of caribou. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
Yeah, thanks, Luigi. And just so it's clear, it wasn't necessarily a criticism of any one party. It's a frustration, I guess, on my part as an observer to this, that while we continue to talk, we have a wide gulf in positions being presented, and we need to narrow that gap. And we're not doing a very good job at it, I'd suggest. This workshop may help narrow that gap, but there's still going to be something of a chasm, I suspect, at the end of it. I'm going to call a break right now. We're going to try and reorganize the room so there's more space. We're going to try and get the phone line up and running. And we have a few minutes because of the Kivalliq Inuit Association deferral till tomorrow. So let's take 15 minutes and resume.
Okay, thank you, Peter Kapuna from KLW. Our chair couldn't be here today, so I'm the co-chair for the Kitikmeot Wildlife Board. Yeah, in the past couple of years, the Kitikmeot Regional Wildlife Board has been very active in discussing caribou matters with a wide range of co-management partners. We have also met with representatives from our member HGOs. We have constantly heard concerns about any mining exploration that may occur on caribou calving grounds and water crossings. KRWB has heard that any exploration activity that occurs on caribou calving grounds in the Kitikmeot will not be supported by the HDOs and local committees. This position has been affirmed in discussions with the elders. Protection of caribou habitat has never been more important, and we have appreciated the government of Nunavut's stance to protect caribou habitat. The commitment to protect caribou grounds in full supported by KRWB. We have participated in various discussions on caribou protection measures with organizations such as NPC, RWOs, HDOs, and Nunavut Wildlife Management Board. As you are aware, NPC is currently drafting a land use plan in Nunavut, which involves a wide range of organizations, governments, and other interests from Nunavut and NWT. We cannot emphasize enough that caribou calving grounds in our regions need to be protected from exploration and development, especially water crossings. Caribou is the main diet of the Inuit, and the skin is used for clothing. Caribou are a vital part of Inuit culture, and we wish to ensure that Inuit have access to caribou for generations to come. Thank you on behalf of Simon.
Thank you, Peter. Any questions, observations? All right. Okay, Kikitani Wildlife Board, sorry.
Hello, Jackie Price with the Kikitalik Wildlife Board. I'll be making a couple of remarks on behalf of the organization. Before I begin, I just would like to identify that I am a staff member of the organization. I do not sit on the board. We were not able to get members of our board to this meeting. But what I can do is I can pass on the direction I've received from the board. And this direction has been informed by multiple conversations with HTOs, be it the manager or the board themselves. Just a couple of basic facts. HTOs are organizations recognized under the Nunavut Land Claims Agreement. Their membership represents an extensive and important demographic of Inuit in Nunavut. Inuit beneficiaries over the age of 16 are able to be HTO members. Conversations at the HTO board level, and therefore the regional wildlife organization level, focus extensively on wildlife, the environment, questions of protection, and harvesting. So we are well versed in these conversations, and they are at the forefront of everything that we do. Inuit want caribou protection. They want protected land areas. I'm not extending myself by saying this. At the QWB AGM held in November 2015, the Kikitalik Wildlife Board passed a resolution affirming their commitment and their desire to have caribou grounds protected. The specific grounds included calving, post-calving, migration routes, and corridors, access corridors. I hope that's straightforward. The importance of this stance cannot be underestimated. Inuit have witnessed mining and development They've witnessed multiple projects right across the region. And they've witnessed the life of those projects and their involvement and engagement with the environment well beyond the life of the project. In the Qikiqtaaluk, we draw on what we call 3 main caribou populations: Perry, Baffin Island, and the reindeer in Sanikiluaq. We are aware that various other organizations develop or have created further subpopulations. QWB makes this strong stance on caribou grounds, even though within the GN submission to NPC, no calving grounds were identified in the plan. That, while not ideal, that doesn't sway the organization's deep belief that communities know those grounds and want those grounds protected. In preparation for the public hearing on this draft land use plan, QWB, and we are working with co-management partners, we are working to organize a workshop on caribou grounds in this region. We plan to have areas identified on a map in time for the mid-June deadline for the public hearing. And this work will be further supported by ongoing communication with the HTOs to prepare them for the public hearing in November. And as a staff member and a witness to the multiple conversations that have occurred on caribou in the last year and prior, I will say that I cannot wait for this public hearing. And as many of you will have already known, when you have that many community delegates in one room, the tone of the conversation will drastically change. And in my opinion, for the better. So it's QWB's perspective to prepare for the public hearing and to provide whatever support the diverse range of community representatives need in order for them to speak as freely as they must at the public hearing. And in closing, my last point is QWB would like to point out that this is a first generation plan. We don't have to have all the answers set in stone. I know concerns have been raised, they're on the table already, about how do I say it? Concerns have been raised about the designation and the importance of having designations figured out right away. This is not possible at this time. So it is QWB's opinion that to err on the side of caution. We're not saying it has to stay like this forever. As NPC has repeated numerously at this meeting and at meetings in the past, revisions can happen. Conversations can continue past this first generation plan. So in fully knowing that ability is constantly there, we would recommend to err on the side of caution until we've developed systems to better engage communities directly in this conversation. Because I believe QIA made very important points about the level of engagement at the community level. And constant engagement with the community should be a central goal of this plan, considering how important it is and how it does center around future development within Nunavut, not just resource development, but the development of people, communities, infrastructure, and everything. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jackie. Any questions for Jackie? All right, we'll move on to World Wildlife Fund. Brandon?
Hi, Brandon LaForest with WWF Canada here in Iqaluit. Thank you for having us here. I'd like to start my comments short by reiterating part of Peter's opening remarks, that it is important to first talk about caribou protection independent of industry, as was the spirit at the NWMB workshop late last year. And on that regard, I'm encouraged to see NWMB here at the table and look forward to their contributions. Of course, the goals of industry need to enter the conversation, but caribou should be discussed independently first, so we agree on the most conservation approach before undertaking a compromise that is necessary, that will balance the well-documented needs of the territory to develop its natural resources. In that regard, it's important that the burden of proof be equal for those advocating for land-based restrictions on development and those arguing for solely mobile protection measures, as well as conversations on the feasibility of both of these options. Arguments will be put forward demonstrating the need to employ protected areas and special management areas in key caribou habitats for disturbance reasons. Direct evidence also needs to be put forward demonstrating that development of a mine in the middle of a calving ground will have little to no impact on the caribou in that area. These evidences can then be weighed along with considerations of values of Nunavummiut and goals of the territory. Habitat protection is not the only tool to conserve caribou, but it is definitely one tool among a suite of tools across the range and life cycle of caribou. I'd like to reiterate that habitat protection and mobile protection measures need not be exclusive of each other. The best measure for caribou and the territory will likely be a mixing of the two. Sharon spoke about how this is a first generation land use plan, that the plan can be amended, that exemptions can be applied for, and that it was mentioned this morning that the plan will be reviewed at minimum every 5 years. Given the current status of caribou and the concern expressed by HTOs, we feel, echoing Jackie, that a precautionary approach needs to be undertaken. What's at stake if a precautionary approach is undertaken in this first generation of the land use plan is new projects in caribou calving grounds will be delayed or potentially not undertaken for now. The minerals will not disappear. The potential to develop those minerals will remain. What is at stake if we do not undertake a precautionary approach is the potential for irreversible effects on the status and recovery of caribou herds in Nunavut. Our positions are found in our submission to NPC, so I won't go over them. But we look forward to this discussion, and again want to thank NPC for our inclusion in the discussion. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Brandon. Any questions of Brandon? Okay. Kuvilik, are you guys ready to make your argument? Then the floor is yours.
Good morning, all of you.
Good morning. I'm Stanley Adjuk, President of Kivalliq Wildlife Board, known as KWB. With me today I have Basil and Warren Bernauer, and our regional coordinator couldn't make it out of Agbiat yesterday, so I'm expecting her tomorrow, who is Leah Magpa. The Kivalliq Wildlife Board appreciates the opportunity to participate in this workshop. Kivalliq Wildlife Board is a regional wildlife organization and responsible for supporting and representing the hunters and trappers in our region, known as HTOs. Our mandate outlined in the Land Claims Agreement, we focus on wildlife management and harvesting for this region, and we work closely with the hunters and trappers to fulfill this responsibility. The Kivalliq Wildlife Board is made up of myself and the chairs of the Kivalliq Hunters and Trappers Association organizations. Caribou habitat conservation has been a major topic for our board, the Kivalliq Wildlife Board, for a number of years now. We regularly discuss these issues at our annual general meetings and our board meetings. And the board members bring the unique perspective of their various communities. Kivalliq Wildlife Board has submitted recommendations to the Nunavut Planning Commissions for the protection of caribou habitat. I'll hand out these comments later now that so everyone has a copy. Kivalliq Wildlife Board recommends core calving grounds, core post calving grounds, and water crossings on the mainland be designated protected areas. These areas should be fully protected from mining and exploration activities. Kivalliq Wildlife Board recommends caribou on Southampton and Coates Island be given seasonal protection during calving season until more information about calving grounds on these islands is available. Kivalliq Wildlife Board recommends caribou migration routes be designated special management areas. These areas should have seasonal protection during migration season. Kivalliq Wildlife Board recommends implementing mobile protection measures in addition to the above listed protected and special management areas. All explorations and mining companies should cease operations if caribou and nearby during calving, post-calving, rutting, and migration season. Our board has been discussing the need for greater protection for calving and post-calving grounds at our meetings for years. We have passed board resolutions opposing development in these areas at all of our recent annual general meetings. These resolutions were based on our knowledge as hunters, recommendations from elders, recommendations from wildlife biologists, and recommendations from the Kivalliq HTOs who represent their communities. All of the mainland hunters and trappers boards in the region have supported protecting calving grounds. Once our regional coordinator, Leah Makpa, is in town, if anybody has questions, she'll be able to answer as she's been dealing with this a lot, along with Warren Bernauer. I want to give you a perspective from my home community of Well Cove. Well Cove is a community closest to the Kamanagjoc calving grounds. It is particularly right at our doorstep, and the elders in our community, they always taught us to respect the calving grounds. We are not to travel into calving grounds during calving season. We should stay out of there. And we don't hunt females or calves during calving and post-calving season. Us hunters, Inuk hunters, we've been taught by our elders. We go along with our elders all the time. And a lot of us respect our elders, so we listen to elders. Meaning to that, the bulls, that's bull hunting season. So we've always been taught to protect the calving grounds. But it's hard to protect them when we're not in one pace together. When I was the chair with Well Cove HTO back in 2013, we tried to get Anconia out of the Kamanagjoc calving grounds, which helped a bit. The company was drilling right in the middle of the calving grounds. We passed resolutions saying we wanted them out. in saying that we want the calving and post-calving grounds to be protected. Then the resolutions we wrote, another letter saying they want full protection for calving and post-calving grounds. So this issue of calving and post-calving is very important to our region in the Kivaldak. And I know also Tichangmute and Baffin. Caribou is our main staple of diet. Without that, I know a lot of us would be starving. We just want our Kamanuk Jok herd or any herd to be protected. Mining comes and goes. We all know that. They bring money. For how long? We don't know. Caribou's been there forever. We still want it to be there. We'll probably have more to say later on, so thanks for giving us this opportunity. And before we finish, Basil will continue.
Stanley, Platia, Basil kanina yung this kabila natin
is Basil. I'm going to read.
I'm Basil kanina. I'm on the Baker Lake HTO board, and the board asked me to come here to give the HTO's perspective on caribou habitat. As you're all aware, Baker Lake is inland. We don't really hunt sea mammals there. Caribou is basically all we really have for country food. We know that in other regions they have quotas and restrictions on caribou hunting. All across the North Labrador, Northern Quebec, Baffin Island, Southampton, and the Northwest Territories, they put quotas or even ban on hunting many of the herds. Quotas or bans on hunting caribou would be a disaster for the people in Baker Lake. I don't know if we will be able to feed ourselves properly, so we have to make sure caribou are properly protected, so we don't end up in that situation. The Baker Lake HTO would like protection for caribou calving grounds and caribou water crossings. We have been trying to protect the most important caribou habitat since the 1970s, when explorations first really ramped up in our area. We asked for land freeze on exploration until we had a land claim. We thought the land claim would help us protect these areas, important caribou habitat and our important hunting grounds. But now we have the claim, and those areas are still not protected. This past fall, the HTO held a workshop with hunters and elders to talk about caribou habitat at the workshop. Caribou calving grounds and water crossings were discussed. Everyone agreed that both should be fully protected. We know that caribou are very sensitive when they give birth. We were always taught not to hunt cows and calves when they were giving birth or nursing. The water crossings, the caribou are very sensitive there as well. The elders said that The smallest disturbance, the littlest noise, and the smallest changes in the landscape could make caribou change their migration and cross somewhere else. And the elders shared a lot of knowledge of traditional rules and rules for respecting water crossings. They were taught never to hunt or camp on the side of the river where the caribou enter the water, for example. And they were taught not to make camp or cache meat too close to the crossings. Back in 2012, the Baker Lake HTO worked with other HTOs in the region to try to stop Anconia Resources. Anconia wanted to explore right in the middle of the cabin grounds. The HTO chair at the time, Hugh Aiko, wrote a lot of letters to NERB, to KA, and to the company. I'm going to hand out the letter he sent, which Warren has. Hope it gets you to understand where we're coming from. The companies always tell us that it's only exploration, and that there are protection measures like seasonal restrictions. Work shuts down during calving season, or work shuts down when the caribou come close. Sure, that might make sense, might be the case. But what if we find something during the exploration? They will want to mine it. And a whole mine with roads and quarries and a mill and everything, I don't think you could put that in the cavern grounds and not cause a disturbance. You should really understand there's really no way the hunters from Baker Lake would ever be comfortable with a mine in the cabin grounds. We would never be okay with that. And we're not alone. I know the hunters from up there won't be okay with it either. We work a lot with Upwet when we were fighting against Anconia. Mana.
Thank you, Basil. Any comments, questions? All right, thank you. So, Beverly Kaminariak, Earl, are you ready to go?
Yes, good morning, David. We have a split presentation here. Leslie, our biologist, will be speaking first.
Thank you. It's Leslie Wakelin. I work for the Beverly Kaminariak Caribou Management Board. And who is the board, just in case some people don't know. The BQCMB is a co-management board that has been in place since 1978, and it's responsible for advising communities and governments on the management of the Beverly and Kaminariak caribou herds.
Leslie, can I ask you to slow down a little bit?
Sure, I'll try. Thank you. These herds use habitats in Nunavut, Northwest Territories, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. And the board members represent more than 20 communities in these areas, as well as the 2 provincial and 2 territorial governments and the federal government. The board has asked NPC and asks all parties involved in this deliberation to more clearly recognize that many of the caribou herds in Nunavut spend only part of the time in Nunavut, and they provide a shared resource to communities and people across the caribou ranges. It needs to be clear that caribou harvesters outside Nunavut will be affected by decisions that occur in Nunavut and decisions that are made by Nunavut organizations and the people here. So the board reminds decision makers that because many caribou herds are a shared resource, many people are watching and hoping that the Nunavut Land Use Plan will clearly show how much Nunavummiut continue to value caribou. It is hoped that Nunavut will act cautiously and do their best to protect caribou for the future. And this is particularly relevant in this day of declining caribou herds, where many, many people are undergoing hardship, in particular in communities in the Northwest Territories, because of the status of the caribou herds. The board and many communities it represents believe it's essential that the most sensitive and most important caribou habitats have effective protection from the negative effects of land use activities and mineral exploration. And I stress protection of caribou habitat here. The most sensitive habitats that require protection are found in calving, post-calving areas, and around key water crossings, as the Baker and Kavalik Wildlife Board reps have just stressed. The board believes that the conversation we should be having here about the future of land use planning and the future of Nunavut should not be a choice between permitting mines or protecting caribou. What it needs to be is about protecting caribou while conducting very careful and cautious economic development. So this is not really radically different from the view that's presented by the Chamber of Mines, for instance. But the critical difference here is that the perspective of the board and caribou harvesters it represents is that mineral exploration and development occur outside of calving and post-calving areas and key water crossings, and that this is required for the sustainability of the herds over the long term. This would allow land use activities to occur across most of the vast lands of Nunavut. So the board in these communities and the caribou harvesters believe this is a perfectly reasonable point of view. The board believes that what is required to protect caribou in Nunavut is a combination of area protection and seasonal restrictions on land use activities that reduce disturbance and other effects on caribou. Seasonal restrictions may be implemented through improved mobile caribou protection measures, although we have not yet seen how these new measures will be implemented, if they will be tested, or how they will be proven to actually protect caribou adequately. It is clear that it is not a question of area protection or protection measures. One issue is that there seems to be much confusion about the proposed application of the existing caribou protection measures, mobile protection measures currently in place by industry, and new mobile protection measures that we have heard a bit about but not seen any explanation of, at least in this forum. And people talk about protection measures as though we all know what exactly they are, and that we know that they actually have an effect in protecting caribou from disturbance. And we have not really seen that yet in this meeting. One major element of the confusion appears to be that there is not a clear understanding of the intent and limitations of these various versions of protected measures. The key issue for the board is that these measures are a tool for mitigating effects of land use activities in terms of avoiding or reducing effects on caribou, but they are not a tool for habitat protection. We have submitted various descriptions of the board's position with quite a lot of detail to the NPC, and it's on the public record, so I won't go through them here today. But I would also like to say that the board has asked for a precautionary approach. Others have raised that issue here today. And for people to consider the management of risk. it should also be in the overall context of cumulative effects on caribou, which is particularly of great concern in the situation we're in now, where most herds are declining. The board believes that before any decisions are made to not provide protection through the land use plan for caribou habitats, such as calving and post-calving areas and key water crossings, those parties who are arguing against protection need to provide convincing evidence that there is no risk of serious long-term effects to the caribou herds that would result from leaving these areas open for their proposed activities. The board takes this strong position because there is no undoing the effects of mines, roads, and associated human activities on caribou calving grounds once they are established. We will not be able to go back and reverse changes to habitat or changes in the ability of caribou to access habitats they need on the calving grounds once they are in place. We have an opportunity here now with the first Nunavut land use plan to be cautious and to do our best to take care of caribou habitat, the habitats that are most crucial. And as has been said before today, we need to remind people that the first land use plan is flexible and temporary and will be reviewed and can be changed when new information becomes available. One more thing I'd just like to stress is that the board does not agree that removing areas of high mineral potential from protected areas is adequate, because it will create a patchwork of areas that are protected and not protected. Even just from the point of view of industry, it does not seem to be a workable solution, because there will be different prohibitions, different conditions applied in a patchwork of areas. But from a caribou's point of view, there will be disturbance, there will be potential mines in various areas that the herds require to access their calving grounds and post-calving areas. So we can discuss that more later in our other presentation. And I'll pass it on to Earl to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Earl Evans here, Chair of the Caribou Management Board. I'd like to welcome everybody here this morning, and ladies and gentlemen, and also the elders in the back here that are here present today. Thank you for coming. One of the advantages of speaking last is you don't have much to say because everybody said it. So I think Leslie covered quite a bit of what we had to say there. But some of the really main important parts is, like we said, protection of the calving grounds is one of our main items for being here. And as we know, these herds are a shared resource. So there's not only the people in Nunavut depending on these caribou, it's the 20 other communities on the outlying fringes of this area too that depend heavily on caribou. And with all the herds in steep decline out of Nunavut, the pressure is even more on the Cammon area in the Beverly herds because the other people in the communities cannot access caribou. Right now we have people from Saskatchewan driving 3,600 kilometers into Manitoba to get caribou because caribou have not come through the area. The Cammon area stayed way east this year. And all the dog group communities, the people living way out, Litzoke, all those far outlying communities, they do not have any caribou this year. The caribou are all up on the coast. They have not come anywhere where there's any roads or any development, and they're very, very hard to get. So the guys are looking at $20,000, $30,000 worth of planes to go get meat for their community. And it's coming your way. All these herds in the south have been decimated over the years from easy access. Hunters coming from all over. So this is what's going to happen in Nunavut eventually, by the looks of things. because these herds are in serious trouble. This is, right now is a bad timing for everybody because of all the caribou in decline. It makes it harder and harder to make decisions for industry and for the governments because of the complex situation here. We don't know exactly how these caribou herds are going to react. How long is it going to take for them to come back? We don't know that. So we have to, like we say, err on the side of caution. I heard this about 4 times this morning, but I'm saying it again. It's very important. And we also have to really look closely at the different areas. Different areas are sensitive to industry, sensitive to disturbance, main caribou routes. And so we really have to be careful. Some areas you can get away with a bit more activity and stuff, and some areas we can't. So every area has to be treated differently, but also with conservation in mind. And also, I'd like to have a lot of communication with the elders. I've heard it in Baker Lake. A lot of the elders say, we didn't even really know what was going on here. The message never really got to the people that live on the land. It came to them secondhand. They didn't really even know a lot of this development was happening. So I think it's very important for industry, government, HDOs to make sure that the people that are living on the land get the proper communication so they know what's going to take place, not know about it when a chopper's landing at their camp. So these are some of the things that we really have to look at and really explore closely and take a good look before we make any decisions at all. And like I say, elders are very important. Elders are the voice of the land. They've been there for hundreds of years. There are biologists out there. They know more about the land than anybody because they live there. And we have to take their views into, we have to really listen to them and see what they've seen over the years. They've seen stuff there that people have never ever seen in their life. So everything, they're our book of knowledge. So the more information we can get out, the more we can communicate with the elders, I think a better plan can be produced by doing so. So with that, I'd just like to shut down here before David shuts me down. There's a lot of other things that we can talk about, but these are some of the main points that we'd like to get out to the people. And thank you.
I was asked to represent the speaking notes that my colleagues coming in previous meetings presented to you guys. So some of the information I'll present is not new to you, but I think it's important to go over those again. Bruno Croft, GNWT, I'm a biologist with the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. I have probably visited calving ground more than anybody else I can think of. Through surveys, aerials, time on the ground. So I think I can share and attest as much, if not more than anybody else, the sensitivity of what could happen there. So Mr. Chair, I'll read up and I'll jump in here and there on a few comments. And I hate reading this verbatim, but we just had 3 weeks of public hearings and I have to go through this quite a bit. Many of the barren ground caribou herds in Nunavut are shared with the NWT and are value subsistence and cultural resource for people of both territories. Management of these herds should also be shared, particularly as some of these transboundaries herds are in decline or stable, but at low numbers. Mr. Chair, I mentioned that we just went through a series of public hearings on the Blue Nose East and the Bathurst herd, and you've been some of those in the past. And the reason for that is that those herds are declining quick, and we have to come up with total animal harvest for our Aboriginal folks down in the NWT. Some of them won't be able to harvest anymore. So I've heard plenty in the last year and a half of the agony and despair of the people in the NWT of not being able to harvest caribou anymore. So of all the lists of questions that come our way and concern at the very top of the list is concern about the calving grounds. I heard it all week again last week. Protection of the calving ground. What are you going to do about calving grounds? I'll try to slow down a bit. So I can assure you, Mr. Chair, that the majority of the Aboriginal groups in the NWT, co-management boards, our government, are all on the same page as far as offering full protection of the calving ground as listed before, and I'll go through those again in a bit. Caribou are highly vulnerable in the days immediately prior to and during calving and during the post-calving period. It just makes sense. You don't have to have been there to know that. The draft Nunavut land use plan does not or did not do enough to protect caribou calving or post-calving ground. Now, hopefully this will change. I'm not sure where this is going, but we'll make sure we get our voice heard. Disturbance impact associated with industrial exploration and development, helicopters, fixed-wing flights, vehicular traffic, roads, most of all permanent infrastructure, mine sites, right in the core or on periphery of the core calving area will disrupt, for sure, calving behavior and negatively impact calf production, cow-calf bonding, as well as increased potential for cow mortality. I don't think we need to explain that too much. The calving ground, Mr. Chair, are ground zero, right? There's no room for making a mistake here. We cannot afford to learn the hard way and hope that we can go back and correct the mistakes that we may have made by rushing too much and doing something that could be detrimental, and there's a very high risk of it as far as impact on the calving ground. So there's not a whole lot of room there to maneuver. Maintaining the integrity of the calving ground is absolutely crucial to the survival and recovery of any barren ground caribou herd. And protection of calving ground is widely supported by communities throughout Nunavut and NWT. I already mentioned that. Calving ground protection was also one of the highest priority recommended at the 2007 Caribou Summit held in Inuvik. For those of you who may not know, at the outset of the Bathurst calving ground decline, when we found out that we were losing a lot of cows on the calving ground of the Bathurst herd, our government decided to have a pan-territorial provincial Caribou Summit in Inuvik. And a lot of discussion took place, a lot of concerns were expressed, a lot of recommendations came forward. One of them was to prevent any development of any activities on the calving ground. That recommendation hasn't changed. We have had countless meetings on our side of the border and here, because I've been here a few times. Again, I reiterate what I mentioned earlier. Through all those meetings, consultation and all, the one place we cannot afford to make mistakes are the calving ground. So we need to be really careful how we want to approach development on the calving grounds, because there's not a whole lot of room there to make mistakes. So the next point, Mr. Chair, it has changed a little bit here, but I'll read it and then I'll say why it's changed. GNBT supports the Government of Nunavut position as stated in its submission to the Nunavut Planning Commission that industrial activity of any type, including mineral exploration and production, constructions of roads, pipeline, and other infrastructure should not be permitted on the calving ground. Now, I understand that this has changed as of last week. Mr. Chair, I was at a public meeting last week, consultation meeting, public hearings about the Blue Nose East herd. And someone asked again if what we were going to do or what's our position for the protection of the calving ground as a government. So we said ours, and I mentioned that we also support GN's position. Well, ironically, an hour later, I get this text message, Mr. Chair, that GN has changed its position. So I will have a question, and I can speak on behalf of my entire chain of command where this is coming from and how it has changed, respectfully, of course. So our position hasn't changed. I had a meeting with our Deputy Minister late Friday. Can meet the minister earlier. I will speak to our deputy minister later today. Our position is the same. It has not changed. We support full protection of the calving ground throughout. Now, Mr. Chair, I'll add a few more things here that is not on this list. My colleague here mentioned earlier that we should not approach development under a unilateral approach or view or path, and I agree. If we look at our department in the last 10 years or so, we've been part of countless environmental assessment, and we all understand, as biologists working for ENR, that the country needs jobs. We need the minerals, we need the oil, and we need to be part of a solution moving forward with resource extraction and preservation, conservation of wildlife population. So we always approach environmental assessment and negotiation with mining folks in the spirit of collaboration. So we ask hard questions, we get asked hard questions, and we come up with some mitigation measures at some point. Now, as we move further north towards the calving ground, we get nervous. This past fall, we had the J. Cardinal public hearing as part of an expansion of a Acadie diamond mine. And their own wildlife advisors came up with their assessment. This is the proponent assessments, that there is now a measurable effect of impact of development on the Bathurst herd. First time that we can hear and share numbers other than the natural stressors that can impact caribou. So it's out there, and it's building up. As we get closer to the calving ground, and I will say the same thing again, we have no room to make mistakes. We'll continue to talk to everybody and listen to people's concern and do our best to be part of the solution. There is a line in the sand from my perspective, and that's the calving ground. We just cannot jump that one, Mr. Chair, and that's our position, and not changing it. So there's a whole bunch of other stuff I'd like to share and talk. And just a quick note on this protection measures, and we're now starting to hear, like I mentioned earlier, that I've been on calving grounds more probably than anybody else I can think of. I still haven't seen a document about that. Nothing has come my desk. Nothing that would have been peer reviewed or even explained to me. So what is that about? I'm sure there's some values to it in areas in post-calving, whatever the methods are, post-calving areas perhaps in the wintering range, fall range. For the life of me, I cannot envision what the method would be through this protection measure document to mitigate any impact on the calving ground. So wherever that document is, please make it come my way. I'd like to see it. It's pretty much it on that note, Mr. Chair, and I'm sure I'll jump in a bit later.
Thank you, Bruno. And Earl, I forgot to ask if there are any questions of Earl as well as Bruno, so now's the time.
Thank you, Earl Evans here. I don't know if it's a question to Bruno or what, but just as a note, the last 7 or 8 years, the herds have been wintering above tree line. And so what that is doing, it's putting more pressure on habitat in Nunavut. And that seems to be the trend now. The Beverly Hayak and some of the other herds are right on the fringe. They're in the Nunavut part of the territory, so that is added pressure on the caribou habitat in Nunavut. So that's something to consider. Because if these herds do come back, like some of them were 400,000 at one time, and if they ever do come back, 2 or 3 of those herds come back in those numbers, it's going to be an extra item on the planning part of this management plan as how you're going to deal with these extra caribou on the range. But that's looking pretty optimistically. So, but that is there. And like I said, right now we do have the caribou staying up all winter above tree line, so there's added pressure on that resource. Thank you.
Thanks, Earl. Any other comments, observations? Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair or Facilitator, David. So my name is David Lee. I'm the wildlife biologist for Nunavut Incorporated. As Jackie mentioned, I don't represent NTI. I'm a staff member. I'm treating this as a technical workshop. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank Bruno for his comments. I've also worked on most of the Caribou calving grounds, and I corroborate all of the statements that he's made. I think that for most ungulate biologists, there is no question about the critical sensitivity of what we're speaking about with respect to caribou calving grounds for major migratory herds. For those that are not ungulate biologists or don't have that type of experience, I think those reviews and statements also need to be weighed adequately. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any other comments, questions? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Luigi Toretti, Kitikmeot Inuit Association. I have a few questions, and I'm not sure if it's most appropriate to ask them now or if they would be better at a later point in time.
Who are the questions addressed to?
To the government of the GNWT.
Well, why don't you ask a couple now, and then if there are more later, we can get to them later.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Luigi Toretti, Kitikmeot Inuit Association. The management of the calving grounds, it's obviously that's what we're all around here to discuss. I would like to ask a couple of questions in terms of one, in terms of Nunavut harvest. How accessible and how easy is it for Nunavummiut to access? And you need to keep in mind I'm from the Kitikmeot region, so how easy is it for Inuit to actually access these calving grounds, number one. Number two is, what is the level of industrial activity that has happened on the Bluenose East area? So I'll ask those two questions, and I may have a follow-up after.
Bruno, do you want to, and Hannah, I guess, but Bruno first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bruno Croft, GMBT. Thank you, Luigi, for your question. I think you asked a question about harvest in Nunavut, and you asked me to answer this. I think it'd be probably better to ask the collective biologist. I can tell you what I know. In the case of the Bluenose East herd, the overall harvest of the herd, we estimate that the collective probably takes a third of the harvest. And if we look at the allocation that we submitted to the various boards lately, moving forward with the TH, collective would have had about a third moving forward, and it's also GN's position. And that is based on past harvest report from officers in your community. So that's probably as best as I can do on this, Mr. Chair. I think it would be better answered by a Nunavut biologist. What I'd like to add to this, if you don't mind, and Luigi, we have conducted, paid for all the calving ground, all the Bluenose East calving ground and distribution surveys of the Bluenose East and the Bathurst for as far as I can remember. This past summer, we paid, the whole bill for the Bathurst and Bluenose East calving ground surveys is about $1 million now, I'm counting, Mr. Chair. So, in spite of the fact that a third of the harvest does take place in Nunavut, it's a shared resources. We take that seriously, and we share efforts also, because now we are getting more and more help from GN on the Bluenose East. So, sorry for a long answer. That's the harvest, a third of it. And your other question was? Industry. Okay, as Mr. Chair, Bruno Croft, not slave, Luigi. again, you probably know more than me about what kind of industry going on in Bruno's East. All we know about is the activity of the Thunder Corp, if I'm not mistaken, of the name, that took place on the calving ground in the past 2 summers. Drilling sites, pretty much right in the core calving area. When it first started, we didn't know a thing about it. And in the second year, this past summer, we knew, and it went to NERB. And of course, we made a submission, as just about everybody else in the NWT. I think this is the only one I know of. On our side of the border, Luigi and Mr. Chair, there are no known development taking place at this time. Certainly nothing comparable to the Bathurst Road.
Luigi?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to follow up on that. The status of just for everyone's clarification, the exploration project that Mr. Croft is speaking to is an exploration project that actually happened last year. It was not 2 years of exploration. So that's one clarification. The local HTO took some extraordinary measures to work with that corporation, that exploration company, whatever they are, to ensure that they were conducting their activities during a period of time when there were no caribou around. It's been in the news and it's been spoken to quite a bit lately, but there is a lot of misinformation that seems to be abounding with that particular project. The reason I focus on the Blue Nose East is that is a herd, to me, that is very indicative of the concerns that my organization has, in the sense that the population is decreasing considerably. There is no impact on the calving grounds, but yet it is still decreasing considerably. I don't think that the biologists have a very good idea of why that population is decreasing. What are the specific variables that are affecting that particular population? And so let's imagine if we were to protect that entire calving ground, would that necessarily result in a population rebound? I would love to see that link.
Okay, Bruno, I think I'll address what I suspect you're going to respond to. And Luigi, you know as well as anybody that part of the issue is the cumulative effects. Part of the issue, too, is, I guess I'd flip the question around, what would happen to the caribou if development was allowed on the calving grounds? I mean, that's the concern that people have. There's no clear answer to that, but I think the concern folks are raising is that any development may push the herds in a direction that will be completely unhelpful. Hannah, did you want to get in on this?
Hannah O'Neill-Sagar with NTI. Thank you, Bruno, for your presentation. Just from my own understanding, I wanted to get a better understanding of the level of resources that the GNWT puts into caribou management, whether it be monitoring or reporting.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Bruno Coif, GNWT, thank you for your question. We have a number of barren ground caribou herds in the NWT. One we call Tug Peninsula, Cape Bathurst, not to be confused with Bathurst, Blue Nose West, Blue Nose East. These are the ones that we have primary jurisdiction over, mandate, and then we assist GN when they ask us with the Beverly, the Hyack, and the Kamen area. Aerial surveys are expensive. We do a number of those on each of those herds on an annual and seasonal basis. I already mentioned the photographic surveys of the Bathurst and the Blue Nosies added up to about $1 million, Mr. Chair, this summer. In years when we don't have photographic survey, we do distribution surveys, a lot less expensive, provides us with really valuable information. So every year we visit the calving ground. In the fall, in the spring, in the winter, we have other aerial surveys, some to determine the number of bulls in the herd, others to find out the calf recruitment, and general distribution of the animals in the winter. We also have programs involved with health and conditions of the caribou with the communities, and a lot of interaction, engagement, and consultation. So if you're asking dollars, I can take that as an undertaking if you want. I could come back with an exact numbers, but it's huge. And in recent years, I mean, this past year, up until last year, we used to have access to what was called the Caribou Strategy Fund, which added $1 million a year to monitoring barren ground caribou. We do not have that anymore, Mr. Chair. So now we're scrambling to find other ways to continue the very basic amount of monitoring that should be in place at all times, so we don't find ourselves in a situation where we have in the 1990s when we found ourselves complacent and we stopped doing some of those. And the only way we're going to be able to detect all of the above, so any question you might possibly come up with, is if we continue working together with GN and everybody else, not only from the dollars, but also knowledge, traditional and scientific, to stay on top of this barren ground caribou situation. It's not looking pretty out there right now.
Thanks, Bruno. Luigi, did you want to? I noticed that you were heading for the mic there a second ago. Okay. So we'll turn now, I think, to the GN. A much anticipated presentation, gotta say. But no pressure.
Thank you, Steve Pinkston, Government of Nunavut. On behalf of the Government of Nunavut, I'd like to thank the Nunavut Planning Commission for the opportunity to be here with our team and participate in the 4th technical meeting on the draft Nunavut Land Use Plan. The Government of Nunavut hopes that the technical discussions this week concerning caribou result in a consensus among planning parties in how to best address these important issues through the Nunavut Land Use Plan. We are here to collaborate, share expertise, and find beneficial land use planning solutions for all parties. On caribou, the Government of Nunavut has provided very detailed land use planning recommendations in the past, but we are cognizant of and willing to explore alternative land use tools suggested by other participants. Substantially, the Government of Nunavut has recently reconsidered its position on protection of calving areas. You'll recall that in the spring of 2014, the Government of Nunavut, in a submission to the Planning Commission, stated a position that there should be no development in core calving areas and key migration corridors, and seasonal restrictions in post-calving areas. We have very recently reconsidered this position. The Government of Nunavut is no longer recommending a blanket prohibition on development activities within calving areas under the Land Use Plan, but rather a combination of seasonal restrictions and other measures. We will continue to work with all planning stakeholders on this important issue during the workshop. In closing, I'd like to thank the Commission for providing us with the opportunity to continue the discussion on the draft Nunavut Land Use Plan. And we have confidence that the decision will make informed and reasonable decisions based on the information they receive. And we look forward to responding to a revised plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a question, and I suspect it'll be echoed in one form or another. Can you explain the reasons behind the change in position?
I'll do my best, but primarily it was felt that the previous position was overly and unnecessarily restrictive of development. Thank you.
And was there a scientific basis for this decision, or was it, as you describe, a more general concern?
Thank you, Steve Pinkston, Government of Nunavut. It was not a scientific evidence-based decision. It was a one based on many factors, including needs for development and economic development factors. Thank you.
Question, Hannah and Bruno and Jackie and Warren. Shall we just go around the table? Okay, so Hannah first, and then Bruno, then Jackie, then Warren, and we're ahead of schedule, so I think it's fair to say that we can continue the question period at least till noon. Government of Canada is the last one on, and then I'll ask if anybody else has comments they want to make before we get into the rest of the agenda. So we're good to go for a few questions on this, and maybe a few more after lunch. It's fundamentally important, I think, to many people to understand as best they can the change in position. So Hannah?
Goedemiddag, Hannah Oniersager, NTI. Thank you, Stephen. Just so that I can understand clearly, you mentioned seasonal restrictions and other measures. Can you expand on what other measures means, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Steve Pinkston, Government of Nunavut. I don't know if I can give you specifics, but I can give you a context. When the Government of Nunavut, as other parties, participate in environmental assessments of development projects, they look at the potential, or we look at the potential impacts of a given project on water, on caribou, on wildlife in general, socioeconomics, and if there are concerns that we feel are going to be problematic, for example, disturbance to caribou or interrupting a migration route, those are identified through the assessment process. And if we feel that those impacts can be mitigated by whatever the measures, then we would say so. Or if we feel that the impacts cannot be mitigated, then we would say the project needs to be changed. So that's the way that we will be participating in environmental assessments, if that's helpful. Thank you.
Bruno, I think, was next. Just before you go, Bruno, Stephen, I guess what I'm hearing is that you're going to look at things on a case-by-case basis, and there won't be a blanket approach in future.
Steve Pinkston, Government of Nunavut. Yes, that's exactly the case. Thank you.
Bruno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bruno off GNBT. Mr. Pinkston, I think I missed your name there, but I don't know if you could explain to me a little bit how you went about consultation on this topic and your change of position. If we were going to turn on a dime within GNWT and change our position as fundamental and important on the protection of the calving ground without even consulting and visiting all the communities, I don't think we could get away with this. We've been going to meetings steady now for weeks, and we've got 2 or 3 legal counsels on our side. There's legal counsels all around the tables with various Aboriginal groups, making sure that anything that can potentially impact Aboriginal harvesters to continue their way of life as they've known it needs to be scrutinized and a proper case made for it. In this case, I can see the folks on my side of the border wondering why did they not talk to us, let alone talking to your own people. Maybe you have done so, but I haven't heard of it yet. Given that this decision was made last Thursday, from what I understand, and if it had been decided before that, Mr. Chair, surely we would have heard that you went to the communities to make that case. Has it taken place, and how can you do this? Please, somebody tell me if you can actually do this without consulting.
Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Steve Pingston, Government of Nunavut. Bruno, it is a Government of Nunavut position that was not, to my knowledge, was not consulted on. It was a decision made by senior government officials. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. And I'm chuckling because when I worked for the federal government years ago, I can remember being in a similarly tough position. So my sympathies. Jackie? Oh, well, let's do Jackie, and then Warren, then Earl, and then back to Bruno. Yeah.
Thank you, Jackie Price, Kikatelik Wildlife Board. I have 2 questions. The first question is, this is a significant shift in argument since the last technical meeting. Can you provide any insight into how long the department has been working to develop this new position?
Thank you, Steve Pingston, Government of Nunavut. This decision was made within the last 2 weeks, and it's not a Department of Environment decision. It's a Government of Nunavut decision. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. For my second question, as you know, because we work with HTOs, we are very much aware of the arguments made at the local level about the quality and timing and investment in the necessary surveys that are completed to date on various animals, including caribou. Considering this new position by the GN, can you provide any insight into what plans the GN has to reprioritize its resources in order to facilitate the support needed for these other measures? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I noted, this decision is very new, and our resource needs based on this new position are currently being assessed. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, Earl, I'll get to you, but Warren is next, and then I'll get to you. Stanley? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. We all heard that our government, when they announced that, they totally ignored our hard work over the last years. But we also know when we give too much information to our own government, they always go against it. It's happened more than once, and again we were disappointed again. It's disappointment with this announcement and the decision they make when they don't consult with us, when they don't consult with the people they represent. I don't know what they meant when they decided with the shared expertise. I think we had very good expertise given to our GN. Our expertise comes from our elders. We work with them. They live with the caribou. They know the answers. Why our own government never understand their expertise, our elders? it's very disappointing when they don't consult you and when you hear it announced. It's hard enough that we try and work this, consult everyone in our region with the hard work with our workers, going to each community, working with them, and then we give all our stuff to GN. And without consulting, they make their own decision. It's hard when you do a lot of work and they don't even use it, the work you've done. So just another question where they got their shared expertise from. Matna.
I'm Steve Pinkston, Government of Nunavut. I'm sorry, Stanley, by shared expertise, do you mean for this, making this decision, or what? If you could clarify the question. Thank you.
In the beginning when you said the government made the recommendation from the shared expertise, my question is, where were they getting the shared expertise when all we've done was consult with some expertise too, and they didn't even consider what we've been working on over the years. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Steve Pinkston, Government of Nunavut. I just went through my notes, and I don't think I referred to shared expertise in my statement or my responses, and if I did and forgotten it already, I apologize. I can tell you that the correspondence received from the Kivalliq Wildlife Board was received by the Government of Nunavut, all of it, in fact, and all of our departments were made aware of the positions of the HTOs and the RWOs. So that information was available. Thank you.
Yes, Steve, if I can perhaps help out here. I think what Stanley is getting at is the same kind of question I asked earlier. What changed and why did it change? And I appreciate that it's essentially a political decision that considered information presented, and your government made its call based on that. I don't know that you can, if you can add more to it, fine, but I'm not, yeah. All right. Earl, I think, was next, and then Hannah, David.
Thank you, Earl Evans from the BQ board. I know, Steve, you're probably the whipping boy sent here, so you can sign me up for the first 20 lashes. Yeah, I know it's tough coming here and delivering that kind of message, but at the same time, we got to express our disappointment in this decision too, from south of the border. We don't like that at all. I mean, we're affected too. We're users of the herd. And like Bruno says, we put a lot of money, a lot of effort into surveys and working in conjunction with Mitch and all the rest of the people here in Nunavut. We have a vested interest. And we want to see what's best for the herd, best for the wildlife, best for the environment, and best for the people. So with that, I'd just like to say that we're extremely disappointed in the decision. And it doesn't look good for the caribou, let's put it that way. So, thank you.
Sir Earl, any response?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Steve Pinkston, Government of Nunavut. And I guess the one thing I got out of it is you're very, very disappointed with the government's decision, and I expected as much from many of the participants, and acknowledged. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Hannah?
Thank you, Hannah Onyorsagak, NTI. I'll ask my question and then I'm going to forward it over to David for his questions. Steve, in light of this new position, I know that the government of Nunavut had spent some considerable time drafting a caribou management strategy in the past. And if I recall correctly, resources to implement that strategy were not allocated at the time. In light of this new position, does the government of Nunavut plan to redraft the caribou management strategy? And if so, will Inuit organizations and communities be engaged? Koinami?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Steve Pinkston, Government of Nunavut. It's correct that the caribou strategy was not fully implemented, partly due to resource issues. We don't have any plans for a redraft, although full implementation should be done. In the event there was to be a redrafting, we certainly would consult on it, but it's not on the table at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. David?
Thank you. Well, firstly, I just want to echo Earl's comments. I sympathize for the messenger. I realize that that is what you are right now, and I don't envy that position. Having said that, echoing Bruno's comments that decisions that may be made or any actions taken on the basis of this new policy decision could potentially impact the ability of Inuit to exercise their hunting rights and traditional and current livelihoods, especially under Article 5 of the Nunavut Land Claims Agreement. Based on that, what plans does the government of Nunavut have now to consult Inuit on any decisions they make that may affect Inuit rights? Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Pinkston, Government of Nunavut. So you're asking, I think, if there's a development project that potentially affects caribou productivity and reduces harvesting opportunities, how's the government going to deal with that? Is that sort of where you're going?
My apologies. I mean, this has been a recent development, so I'm having some internal discussion within our organization about exactly. Well, you've already answered the question about what consultation has taken place, which is limited to none with the affected people. I guess, having stated that, then the only place we can go to now is how will your government consult the people or Inuit on this new GN position as a general question. If you want to answer it more specifically on a case-by-case basis, that's fine too.
Thank you, Steve Pinkston, Government of Nunavut. Maybe just keeping it in context, this is a Government of Nunavut submission or position submission to the land use planning, to the Planning Commission in the context of developing a land use plan. So the government has stated the policy position. That doesn't create an obligation on the Government of Nunavut to consult on possible impacts of a plan which has not yet been finished. Like I don't think we can make those connections yet. If there is an impact on individuals, the Nunavut Land Claims Agreement, from a project or development, there is an actual process for people to be provided with compensation for that impact. That's Article 6, I believe. So, but to suggest that at this point there's a government obligation to consult on its policy position that it's submitting to the Planning Commission, I would disagree with that. Thank you.
Okay. Brandon, did you have a question?
Brandon LaForest, WWF Canada. I think it was addressed, but just want to maybe get it explicitly addressed. Was the Department of Environment consulted by the GN in making their decision, or were they not consulted when the GN made their decision? Because you mentioned it's a GN decision, not a DOE decision. I was wondering if the GN consulted with the DOE.
I think consulting is the wrong word within an organization. So it's a Government of Nunavut decision, and we're a part of the Government of Nunavut. Thank you.
Okay, Warren.
Thank you very much, David. This is Warren Bernauer for the Kivalliq Wildlife Board. I'd just like to provide a bit of context for some of what Stanley shared with you just a moment ago. As he said, he's quite disappointed. I've spoken to other members of the KWB executive, and they were both quite disappointed as well. The HTOs, which have much less resources and staff than the GN does, really worked hard to engage the public and consult with people in the positions we've developed for the land use plan. As Basil mentioned, there was workshops held, elders and hunters were invited to them. Baker Lake, Arviat, and Chesterfield Inlet, all of those HTO chairs have held several radio call-in shows with the community about calving grounds and caribou habitat. So if the HTOs can do this, it's rather frustrating if the GN with much more resources can't consult with the public, legalistic duties notwithstanding. And I'd just like to say it's difficult to see how the perspective of Kivalliq hunters could have been really considered in this new decision. As Stanley said, we've sent volumes of submissions into the GN. We've written numerous letters. And just as one example, just last week there was letters written by the Chesterfield Inlet HTO chair, the Arviat HTO chair, and the Baker Lake HTO vice chair to their MLAs expressing support for the previous GN's position. And I'll hand out some of these. I was going to use them later as examples of IQ documentation, but I think it's probably more relevant now. And I'd also like to say I don't think IQ was considered in this decision. At least from what I've heard so far, it doesn't seem to be reflective. And HTOs have shared a lot of IQ with the GN and the other planning partners through all of this. Especially about traditional protection measures Inuit had used to protect caribou habitat and caribou themselves traditionally. And I'll speak more to that during our presentation later, but I'd just like to note I don't see any of this reflected in this new decision. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks, Warren. Mike?
Mike Setterington with the Nunavut Chamber of Mines. An issue very similar to this was brought up in our technical review, and it was a question that we asked at the first technical workshop. If the Nunavut caribou strategy is considered a policy document, we came into that first meeting with the draft 2010 version, which stated that working with regulatory authorities, co-management partners, and other stakeholders explore options for preserving calving and post-calving habitat. And then the undated version of a caribou strategy, which is present only on the Nunavut Planning Commission's consultation website, had some substantial changes to it. And it changed that particular action item from working with co-management partners for opportunities to look at preserving caribou habitat to outright protection, which we're talking about now. So we asked the question the first time, when did this policy change come about? And the answer that we got was it's always been that, and then it didn't lead to this kind of discussion. So what I suggest is that the government is actually going back to what had already been presented in the draft caribou strategy. So I don't think it's a change in policy. That would be our opinion. And also to further the discussion, in no way means that the government is no longer interested in protecting caribou. Again, it's going along the path of we already have protection tools in place that occur broadly and also on a case-by-case basis with intensive review. Not now.
Thanks, Mike. Any response, Steve? Okay, it's almost. Leslie, last question, and then we'll take a break and resume at 1:30.
Sorry, I'm kind of in the back row here, but I have a kind of a technical question. I'm not clear on what exactly has been proposed in the new position because of the other measures that are undefined. But my question would be, is this proposal going to provide anything more than the status quo? If not, what is the Nunavut land use plan's value going to be? Is it going to provide any added value for caribou protection? If not, how could that possibly be in a place like Nunavut where caribou is so important to everybody? And also, if your measures at all address the issue of habitat protection, because to me it sounds like on a case-by-case basis you could possibly have a mine in the middle of a calving ground. So those are all kind of technical questions, but it relates to the purpose of the land use plan for caribou protection and the objectives laid out therein. Thank you.
Steve, are you prepared to speak on behalf of the Nunavut Planning Commission?
Thank you. So the first part of the question is, will the land use plan provide value to caribou? I think that's a little early for me, if I could ever do it, to speak to that question. So we'll let the Land Use Planning Commission do its thing. And for the second half, I don't think I can respond at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks folks. We'll break till 1:30. I'd ask people to come back a few minutes before 1:30 so we can start promptly at 1:30. Thank you.